So for me, I got into journalism for different reasons than many people. When I was in school, I was very good at math, and I thought I would be an accountant. I thought that would be a good job. And then I saw a movie about the exciting life of an accountant, and I thought, ooh, that sounds really boring. So I went to the library, and I read a book about how if you're interested in everything, journalism is a good field. So literally based on reading that book in the library, I decided to apply to journalism school. And once I worked in a newsroom, I worked for my local newspaper, I fell in love with it and decided this is what I want to do for my career. Journalism has been a wonderful profession for me and for so many people. When I was a child, my father always said, you need to go to law school, you need to be a lawyer. And finally, after many years, he said, you were right, you did not need to go to law school. Being a journalist is, I think it's great in so many ways. Because first of all, it is fun. You get to see things that other people don't get to see. You get to walk up to people and talk to them and ask them questions. You get to be exposed to worlds that you would otherwise never see. But it also makes a difference in our society. You think about so many ways that journalism changes places, it changes people. And so I believe it's a very unusual profession because it's really fun, but it also really makes a difference. So I was the first woman in many jobs I've held over the years, and that's because I came up in journalism at a time when it had been, in the United States anyway, primarily run by men. So there were women in features coverage, but not in news coverage. So, slowly we moved more and more into the field, and we faced many barriers. We faced barriers of men not thinking we could do the job. We faced barriers of men not taking us seriously. We faced some barriers where men just, refused to allow us to do things. We also faced sexual harassment. Recently, there have been a lot of stories about this in the media, about in the U.S. of powerful men trying to take advantage of particularly young women. This was sort of part of our world for many years, but I think for me and other women like me, we felt that we needed to keep persevering. We needed to work through this because we needed equality. We needed equality in the jobs we did, we needed equality in the pay, and we understood that as there were more women in journalism, the coverage gets better because we would be able to reflect on stories that matter to everyone. Yeah, I think that for young women journalists, it is important to have confidence. I think a lot of times young girls are raised to be very passive and say, tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. And we want to please. That's how we're raised. We're raised to please people. But the reality is that doesn't get you to the top of an organization. If you want to be at the top of an organization, if you want to really make a difference, you've got to be confident, you've got to be persistent, you've got to be courageous. And that means that there will be times when people won't like you. That means there'll be times when people will think you're pushy, or worse, right? There'll be times when people won't listen to you, and because of your gender. But you just have to sort of keep pushing through that with a smile, but also with a lot of steel and tenacity. Journalists need certain qualities. They need to be curious, first of all. To be a good journalist, if you just sort of walk into a room and you have no questions, that's a problem, right? You need to have a lot of curiosity about everything around them because then you see stories and will probe for things that other people wouldn't probe. You also need empathy. I think sometimes this is misunderstood, that the reality is to be a strong journalist, you have to sort of understand what other people are going through, and then you can better tell their stories because you feel their pain, you feel their joy, you feel whatever they're feeling, and you're able to tell them. And I guess if I had to list one more, I would list persistence. That sometimes getting a story is not easy, and it takes a lot of digging and not taking no for an answer. So a good investigative journalist is critical for a democracy and for society, for any society, because someone needs to hold the people in power accountable. People in power will sometimes do things they shouldn't do, and they're not going to tell the population about it. And so ultimately it is journalists who see what's wrong in a society, shed light on it, and then the people respond. And it is one of the things that makes journalism so powerful in this world. So one of my favorite stories was a story I worked on when I was the editor of the paper in Atlanta. And it's a little complicated to tell. I'll see if I can tell it, but it was a story that took us 3 years to actually do. We have in the United States, we have testing that all students do. And the testing does two things. It helps figure out if a student is ready to move to the next grade, and it also helps sort of define if the school is doing a good job. And what we found is that in one school district, in the Atlanta City School District, there was a lot of cheating going on. And so this was very problematic. It meant that students who should get tutoring weren't getting the tutoring because their scores had been tampered with. It meant in some cases teachers were actually telling their students to cheat and telling them what the right answers were, and what kind of moral lesson does that give for students. And third, it made everyone think that the schools in Atlanta were much better than they were because the scores were inflated. So we investigated this. We faced a lot of political pressure from the politicians, from the business community, from national organizations. But ultimately, there was a prosecution, and there were more than 50 indictments, and several teachers and administrators went to prison over their actions. That's a really good question, is what's the biggest sacrifice? The thing about journalism is it's never ending. It is 24/7. And as a mother of 2 children, that can be a challenge sometimes. And so, I think I did my best to raise my daughters in a way that they would grow to be productive young women and happy. But there were times when I couldn't be there for them, when I had to be at work because of news stories and other events. I think, it's true in any job that we all make sacrifices for our work, knowing, that that's necessary. But in journalism, you just sort of never know when those sacrifices are going to come based on the news of the moment. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. But I don't really think of journalism as a profession where you make sacrifices in many ways. I think it's a profession where we give so much to the community and we get so much back. And so I feel very honored to have been a journalist.